All right, we're just going to give people a chance to kind of file in, make sure that their audio is set up here. So just a minute or so. And by the way, to everyone that is joining, you are automatically muted and your videos are not enabled, so you don't have to worry about being seen or heard. Only the panelists can be seen or heard. All right, and I think we've got something akin to a critical mass, so I'll just start us off just with a few logistical notes. For those of you that either watched the recording or joined us for last week's coffee break, this is a different platform than we usually use for our webinars. It's a little bit more interactive, and I just wanted to cover that for you really quick before we move into the content. There is a webinar chat, which you can use to chat with both the panelists and with everybody else. Feel free to use that chat for any kind of side discussion, commentary, whatever you like. But if you have a question that you want addressed by the panelists, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom dashboard. You'll be able to see other questions that were asked, and you can upvote those if you like that question. And you can also add your own comments to that question, but it's a good way to kind of keep the question and answer period, which we're reserving around 30 minutes or so for, a little bit more organized and a little more helpful to you all. So again, to reiterate, chat is for side discussion, any kind of technical questions, and then use the Q&A for things related to the content. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Melanie Gottlieb.
Thanks, Mike. Good afternoon. I'm Melanie Gottlieb, Deputy Director of ACRO, and I'd like to welcome you to ACRO's second coffee break. Again, we had originally intended these sorts of coffee break conversations to be video chats with members and panelists, but the popularity of the topic necessitates moving to this webinar format. We're expecting nearly 500 people on this call today. Regardless, it's a pleasure to be on the line with all of you as we navigate the new world of remote delivery of content together. Joining me today on this presentation are three-member panelists who I especially want to recognize for giving time to ACRO while in the midst of a campus crisis to share with you their perspectives, which may be helpful as you navigate decision-making on your own campuses. First, we have Tammy Agard, Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management at the University of Florida, and also Vice President for Admissions and Enrollment Management on the ACRO Board of Directors. Also, we have Seth Kamen, Assistant Vice President for Undergraduate Recruitment and Strategy at the University of Baltimore in Maryland. Dr. Kristen Waters, Director of Enrollment Services for the Borough of Manhattan Community College in New York. And in addition, we have our own Dr. Wendy Kilgore, ACRO's Director of Research. We're very hopeful that our technology will not fail us today. This is a large Zoom call. We're not using the video function and your mics are all muted so as to save on bandwidth. As Mike indicated, we ask that you use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen to ask your questions, and we will address them as best we can during the Q&A section of the webinar. With so many of you on the call, we know that we will not be able to answer all of your questions. Rest assured, they will be collected and added to the ever-growing list of policy questions that our guidance team is working through every day. Who is the guidance team? It consists of Executive Director Mike Riley, myself, Associate Executive Directors Tom Green and Tina Deneen, and Director of Research Wendy Kilgore, all former campus-based professionals with years of experience, along with Director of Government Relations, William Gill. To build our guidance, we're using established ACRO standards and guidance, re-envisioning them through the lens of the current COVID-19 crisis, and then consulting with subject matter experts from our board of directors and amongst the membership. While this is not the way ACRO typically releases new guidance, we are balancing the processes of member development with the need to address the current crisis with something immediate to support you as you navigate this new normal. We want to give you the guidance that is thoughtful and well-developed, yet timely. Next slide, Mike. Here's our agenda for the day. I'm going to give you a short overview of the resources that are already available on the ACRO website. both on the member as members and as non-members. Then Dr. Kilgore is going to give you recent survey results. Then we'll move to our institutional practitioners who can talk about their perspectives on these issues at their campuses. Then Tammy Agard will give you an overview of the guidance, and then we'll move to Q&A. We're going to try to keep our remarks as short as possible to give you lots of time for discussion. Next slide. Quickly, the Artg Academic Record and Transcript Guide was just released last week, and that is available in the Acro bookstore. It will be available in Kindle format soon, I believe this week or next. Next slide. We have a publication that came out several years ago on student displacement, and we have made chapter 6, which is the chapter on medical outbreaks on campus, as a free download open to the public. And so you can get to that from our COVID pages, and that's acro.org/COVID-19, or you'll be able to click through that when you download the slides later. Next slide. Additionally, we have a free report available, Inclusive Admission Policies for Displaced and Vulnerable Students. This report was originally intended to be focused on issues around refugee students, but the lessons from the report and the practices in the report are actually applicable in any crisis situation where documentation can be a challenge. It shares the essential philosophical approach to disruption and crisis practices. And I will say it really is about clear communication to your stakeholders, transparency of your practice to those stakeholders, a consistency of approach and an application of the practice, and acting in the best interest of the students. So application of all of these ensures an appropriate balance between protection of institutional integrity and the support of student success. That is available as a free download as well, and I hope that you will check it out. Next page. Lastly, we've heard a lot of conversation around the delivery of transcripts and challenges in that area. And I want to point out that we have the basic guide to electronic data exchange, which does address the most commonly asked questions regarding electronic data exchanges. Acro Speedy and the Speedy Standard has been around now for 30 years. We're celebrating the 30th anniversary. And yet we still have a lot of institutions who are struggling to put this practice in place. And we have seen in this current crisis that those institutions who do not have the ability to both deliver and receive an electronic transcript are struggling with these processes. And so we're hopeful that perhaps this might be something that will help institutions as they try to serve their students in this way. Next slide. Lastly, we just want to share with you that we are offering a free 3 months membership to any institutional, any individual at your institutions. And so because with the circumstances around this outbreak, we know that we want to share our member resources as broadly as possible. And so if you would like to add someone to your roster at your institution to give them access to our resources during this crisis time, you can email membership@acro.org or click on this link when you download the slides, and you will see the ability to have 3 free months of membership for additional members. We're hoping that by sharing these resources, we can help your institution navigate all of these challenging decisions through these times. Next slide. And with that, I am going to turn the mic over to Dr. Wendy Kilgore.
Thank you, Melanie, and welcome everyone. Last week, our focus of our discussion was on grading and transcripts, and some questions came up also about commencement. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get quick practice surveys out and back, and then the results posted for everyone to see what other institutions are doing. So the survey was open from Monday to midday Wednesday. We had over 600 responses. The report is posted to the ACRO website and available to both members and non-members, and it will be emailed directly to all members today. So the next couple of slides, I'll just spend a minute or two highlighting. Again, you can see that we had responses about, or questions about what they were doing for classes for the remainder of the term. Most have moved online. And we also talked about summer, or asked about summer, and a lot of folks have either moved or considering moving to entirely online for summer. One of the questions that we were asked many times before was, what are the grading and practice changes, transcript changes? 27% so are not making any changes, but the remainder have made considerable changes to their grading and transcript practices, and those are again detailed in the report. Also asked about whether or not we thought degrees were going to be delayed, and most don't think so, that they're going to go ahead and get out the degrees posted by when they anticipated originally. Next slide, please, Mike. Graduation ceremonies, there have been some cancellations entirely, also rescheduling and moving to a virtual option among the respondents. And we asked about academic standing. That's one of those things that's come up many times as well. And the questions and answers of what are folks doing about honors and academic probation and all those other categories of things that are calculated on GPA. 44% are adhering, but 6% have suspended them. And we learned that most institutions, the vast majority of both undergraduate and graduate serving institutions, are giving students the choice to have one or more of their courses changed to pass-fail or another institutional equivalent. So again, these results are available online now, the comprehensive survey of the 600 plus institutions. And next Monday, I will be deploying one on admissions, and it will follow up the same sort of way. We'll collect it for 2.5 days, turn the responses around and get it out on Friday. So a lot of the questions you asked today will help shape that survey. Thank you. And Tammy?
Next slide, please. Happy Friday from the University of Florida. My name is Tammy Agard, and I'd like to just give you a brief overview of what we're doing here at the University of Florida. As admissions professionals, you understand that we have one foot in the current class and one foot in the future class, and so we are looking at various options, not only for our current class, but going forward with the future class. So currently, we have canceled all of our yield events and moved them to a virtual format. So we're doing virtual yield events throughout that address specific populations, that address certain regions of the country that would have been traditionally here on campus. We are beefing up our virtual tour so that students can get an opportunity to see the University of Florida. We are not, however, changing our May 1st deadline for confirmations, but we are being flexible with that if individuals contact us and need more time. One thing we have done for all of our Pell eligible first generation students is we have waived the tuition deposit part of the confirmation, and we are putting out an announcement to all of our admitted students that if their financial circumstances need us to waive it, we will waive it for any student. Going forward, we at the University of Florida have a self-reported academic record, so all of our admits input all of their coursework, but we do finalize transcripts for our current, and for all confirms. We will be much more lenient in the finalization, not only delaying it through the end of the fall term, but also being much more lenient in final semester grades and success for those students, given this major disruption that they have undertaken. In the transfer area, we have always allowed for unofficial transcripts to be used for transfer and graduate, so we will continue that practice. And that's the University of Florida. I'll turn it over to Seth.
Thank you all very much. Give you a little bit of a background. The University of Baltimore is an urban public institution located in the heart of Baltimore. We enroll roughly 4,000 undergraduate, graduate, and law students who are a little bit unique in the state of Maryland and then also in the country. Because we've already offered online programming since 1999, and the majority of our students would be classified as non-traditional, we didn't face as many challenges moving online as others may have. We already had online classes, we already had our recruitment events online, we already had advising and student services online. So we actually happily did not have too much of an issue moving online. That being said, we are still recruiting and admitting students for both the summer and the fall term. We actually do admit students for the summer term, which is a little bit of a different challenge right now, as they are still trying to get applications completed and advising and enrollment. We've seen our largest challenge in identifying how to continue to engage our prospects, how to remove barriers for admissions. So we have actually been much more open and flexible with giving application fee waivers, with moving or completely removing deadlines, and then also trying to streamline the application process and the admission process so that there's less time between admissions decisions and there is less barriers or less hoops to jump through. For our freshman population, we do still have a deposit, and we are able to waive that if we need to. Our transfer and graduate populations do not have a seat deposit, so lucky enough, we do not have to worry about that. The crisis has actually really forced us to rethink how we communicate and how we advertise, market, and sell our institution. We're trying to utilize our website a lot more. We launched an admission-centric FAQ to answer questions regarding to the pandemic. We've purchased an online chat function, and we've changed our approach to social media and marketing. We're also trying to develop some new outreach activities that we've never had in the past related to different majors or populations. And we're really trying to communicate more with our feeder institutions, primarily because they are now our recruiters. Unfortunately, of course, we can't go out and be recruiting the way that we normally would be during the spring semester. As per the guidelines that are being released, I don't want to spend too much time talking about freshmen, but for transfer, our admission is on a rolling basis. We're being flexible with accepting unofficial transcripts on a case-by-case basis. We are not going to a comp launch accept all unofficial transcripts. We have about 50% of our students receiving some type of federal financial aid award, and there are some rules and regulations about having official transcripts in for the disbursement of those. So we want to be very cautious and careful about what our rules are related to that area. We do have a statewide agreement being finalized that will ensure that we accept and apply coursework taken in another public institution that is graded on the PF scale. There are provisions in that agreement about using courses to satisfy general education and major requirements. We will count a P as satisfying requirements for any of our course requirements that require a C or better, and the PF grade will not hinder a student's ability to be admitted to the institution nor receive one of our merit-based scholarships. On the graduate side, everything is at the moment status quo. We've recently gone to GRE and GMAT optional for most of our programs, so that was not something that we had to really address at this time. There has not been a request by students to be able to submit an unofficial transcript, although I am sure we will make accommodations as necessary. Our faculty who make the admissions decisions for our graduate programs have pledged to be more flexible and open with the timing of applications, access to documents, etc. We've had to integrate some new technology so that we can access documents from home for our faculty members, which was not something that was normally done. And because many of our programs are programmatically accredited, we are waiting on guidance and policies from those organizations to make any final decisions related to that population. And that is the University of Baltimore. I'll now turn it over to Kristen.
Oh, thank you, Seth. Hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Waters from the Borough of Manhattan Community College. BMCC is one of the 24 campuses that is a part of CUNY, the City University of New York. BMCC is the largest community college, and there's 6 community colleges in the system city. So I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing as a city system, and then also individually what BMCC is doing. So within CUNY, we have kept with our normal admissions process. From what I understand, our senior colleges, which we refer to, which are 4-year institutions, they are keeping their May 1 deadline, as many of those students tend to confirm early because most of our students come in through the community college pipeline and then move into the 4-year area. And so keeping on that May 1 deadline will help everyone keep with their normal processing. But within CUNY, once we complete our admissions process, which the students apply centrally, and then all of the schools are provided a recommended file for us to process at each institution. Once that deadline passes, which is normally around this time of the year, we move to a direct admissions process, which we'll still have. One thing we're implementing for our students who apply now is the opportunity to be eligible for a fee, a waiver of their application fee to encourage students to continue to apply to those colleges. The other thing we've done for our current students is CUNY went on a recalibration period for a week. We actually returned from that yesterday, where all students were put on a recess to give the faculty an opportunity to recalibrate to online learning. We had already done that the week prior, but there were so many sections of classes that needed to move online. It was possible to do that in the week that we had. So students have been on a recalibration period now, and then we've also truncated our current spring break so that students still have the opportunity to get back in their classes virtually and still meet all their contact time. Within BMCC specifically for our current current recruitment class, we are still working with them to move them through the normal cycle of what it would mean to become a BMCC student. So students are still being moved over to our academic advising team on a weekly basis to offer advisement electronically. Our advising office had already done e-advising, but they simply moved that operation completely online. And now our students can use our electronic tools to register for their first semester classes. One idea we already had a online orientation as a complement to our in-person orientation, but we are going to launch that for the entire campus community and use Zoom as a way to connect with our students through having an online orientation for them. We're very concerned about students still feeling connected and a part of the institution. And we personally feel that if we continue to stay connected to them, it'll only reaffirm their want to come to the institution and our value of them. So we're moving to an online orientation. We also send out a bi-monthly newsletter, called the Weekend Update, which acclimates them to the campus community afar. It gives them information on where to eat across campus, things about New York they need to know, about Tribeca they need to know. And so we've tweaked the offerings of that to start talking a little bit more about what it means to be virtual, but we're still staying connected with them through that platform. And lastly, we are launching a virtual enrollment services center. So students are able to come to a website that we're in the middle of building, and they can get information on how to call us. Our contact center is now fully remote. They can live chat with us. We had actually launched our Live Help Now feature on March 15th. It was in the plans already, so the timing of that worked out well, where a student can chat with us, send us a ticket, search our knowledge base, or request a callback at a particular time for their services. And we've noticed over 600 students a day interacting on that website with us. And then when it comes to recruitment, we've tried to move everything virtually. Our March 21st open house was canceled. We called all of those 2,000 registered guests and let them know that they can still be connected with us virtually. So we're moving our open house to a virtual platform that's still being built, but we're doing all of our tours virtually where we're having chats on the side through Zoom. We're promoting all of our recruitment events through our social media outlets. And then we're also, with our high schools that we've partnered with, we're offering pajama parties through Instagram where a student can be in their PJs and do homework. And we're talking to them about what it means to be in college and why it's really cool to go to college. BMCC is the open access institution for the city, so we have an obligation to our entire community to be a presence for them. And so those are some of the things that we're doing. We're trying to implement virtual lines so that students can request access to one of our counselors for financial aid virtually. And it's going to take some time to do, but we'll notice that in the next week. So those are all the ways we're still staying engaged with our community and still trying to welcome our class for the fall. All of our classes for the summer will also be online, but we have not yet published our fall schedule. Our goal is to have classes in person for the fall. That is everything that I wanted to share. So I'm going to turn it over to Tammy. Thank you.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Next slide, please. So many of you may have seen that I did put in the chat a link to the ACRO's guidance for COVID-19. That link goes directly to the admissions pages. So if you want to follow along, I'm going to briefly go over the guidance that we have here. So, oh, and Mike's going to put it up for us. So thank you, Mike. So if we're looking at some of the things that have been developed for admissions for first-time undergraduate students, some of the things we're really talking about are giving a longer runway for our students, given the fact that they have had this major disruption. The high schools, if we think about the disruption that we've had at the university level, can you imagine the K through 12 and the disruption that's happening there, and how many of our students are studying online for the first time, or maybe their high school is not even offering anything online yet and are just trying to wait it out. So given the fact that we don't know when high school graduation will be posted, when we don't know what the grades are going to look like, really looking at some of those things as far as giving students more time to submit those records. In addition, looking at things like standardized testing. Is it something that you can waive for your upcoming admission requirements? If you're an open access institution, you may not even require it, but if you do, is it something that you want to? But also looking at your prospective class. Many of you may have seen that the University of California system has come out saying that they will not use standardized test scores for the next year's admissions. So looking at guidance here, but also drawing on guidance from our NACAC partners in those areas. So trying to transition. One thing that I think is number 6 on here, which is transitioning interviews and audition requirements to a virtual platform. That's something that we don't often think about, but it is something that's really important for our students who might need to audition for admission to specific programs. As we go down into the standardized testing, the advanced placement or accelerated credit, some of those areas really looking at, okay, can your institution just use the grades that will be posted for IB? Are you willing to use the AP coursework test, even though their tests will be administered differently? They'll be online, they'll be shorter. When you take that credit as you would if it had been done in the traditional way. Looking at dual enrollment courses, that's another issue, because many institutions, for high school credit, they're not able to use the SU grading option. So really, how do you look at that? And especially when it might cause a student to have what we call a deficit record in coming into your institution. And is that something you have some flexibility with? So when you're looking at that, making sure that you are, like I said, taking into account what that student has been experiencing over time. And if you are staying with things like standardized testing, it's very possible that that student may have not been in school for up to 6 months before that test was taken. So is that really a true reflection of that student's ability and preparation? So I'm going to go on to transfer students. If we go down to undergraduate transfer students, really taking a look at some of the similar things for transfer students, and I guess I should talk about graduate students and professionals. They're in the same boat as far as transfer students, as far as giving them additional time, accepting additional formats for those transcripts rather than paper only. As I said earlier, the University of Florida, we have used unofficial transcripts for the admission process and then finalized at a later date. So allowing those students to be admitted using those. We do not post the transfer credit from those unofficial documents, but allowing them to be admitted using unofficial documents and then having those records sent on earlier or at a later date, excuse me. And then professional student programs, this is always a challenging one. So really you need to refer to the guidance that has been set out by the accrediting bodies and professional licensure. We've really been hoping that we'd have a lot of guidance there from those professional bodies. I think we're kind of they're more of a wait and see attitude right now with respect to, and we've had some guidance with respect to some of the things like taking SU and counting SU, and will they count that for admission to professional programs? So that's always a challenge there. So with transfer students, very similar as with our other ones, except for I saw a question in the chat about the pass-fail option. And are we looking at things like changing what we would consider a pass or an S grade? And if some institutions are saying a D or above it will be considered for credit. Others, it might be a C minus or above, or a C or above. So really looking at that with respect to your faculty, getting them engaged in those conversations. And then if you are allowing some of that, really paying attention to those transcripts, because it might be that not all institutions have the same philosophy for that transfer credit. There are a lot of questions that are out here, some guidance that's out here, resources that are out here. I want to leave enough time for you in the question and answer period. So feel free to go back to this. If you have additional questions, there is a link there to click if there's any issues. And so I'm going to turn it over now to Wendy Kilgore for the question and answer piece.
Thank you, Tammy. And thank you, everyone. In the Q&A section, the chat window, there's an open and an answered section. And since some of the questions have been answered via text responses, they have sort of moved from open to answered. But I'd like to readdress some of them here, panelists, if you don't mind, so that we make sure all folks can hear the responses. So Tammy, you just addressed about using unofficial transcripts for credit at the graduate level. You're using them for admission, but not for awarding credit. I'd like to pose the same question for the undergraduate level. Is anyone at this point in time planning on it or already accepting unofficial credits, unofficial transcripts to award credit? Because when you think about it, they have to be awarded before folks can register for courses that have prerequisites and co-requisites. So panelists?
This is Seth. I'm happy to address that if you'd like. A lot of institutions will not use an unofficial transcript to do a transcript evaluation and post credits. There are some liabilities in doing so because you don't know what's happening or what's a final transcript or something of that nature. However, there is the ability in a lot of the software systems to do a transcript evaluation and not make it official or not make it complete, but still to do the evaluation so that it's available for students to go through at least an advising appointment. That is what's really the most important. That then leads into a conversation with your academic advisors about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how to advise students about the fact that they might in the future run into some issues in registering for classes or doing things or having deficits in knowledge based on a final evaluation at some point thereafter. So it's really about open communication, transparency, and then using your software to the best of its ability to give the student as much access and knowledge as possible.
Thank you, Seth. Kristen or Tammy?
I would agree, echo what he said. We do allow them for the advising piece, but we will require the student to submit the official transcript in order for that to be loaded. Now, we do have the option, even if it's listed as unofficial, of waiving prerequisites in the system so that the student can register for those courses. One thing we do have is a large caveat on that that says that if there is a discrepancy, then we reserve the right to not disenroll the student, but not allow them to continue enrollment at our institution.
And ours is a little different than what Tammy said. So we'll use unofficial for the purposes of admission, but the advising office really wants to see the official transcripts for the transfer credit evaluation work before they'll advise a student. And we don't necessarily have too much of that at our institution because our students are usually transferring within the system, and we have a shared transcript that's electronic that follows the student. So we haven't, unfortunately, had too many instances of us having to address that challenge as of now with our transfer population.
Thank you all. We had another few other questions also about whether institutions are, if we have any data on whether institutions are changing their inbound transfer practices. Tammy talked about some of our guidance in that area. I don't know of any data collected thus far, but whether or not folks have actually changed their practices for how they're going to take pass, fail, or other institutional equivalents. Do our panelists, have they made any changes in that particular thing where the non-qualitative binary or equivalent grades are going to be considered differently in transfer and or as part of the admissions process, in particular for admission to selective programs? So that's sort of three parts: transfer, admission, and also admission to selective programs, whether or not your institutions have adopted or are considering adopting a different way for accepting the non-binary, the binary non-qualitative grades.
This is Kristen. I'll start. We have not yet had that conversation. I would imagine it's coming. Much of that will come from our centralized office because they're looking at the best interest of what's happening for all 24 institutions. And the reason I think it's forthcoming is because what I've mentioned earlier about our transfer students. But right now we're trying to actually work on guidance for our current population and how they'll take their classes for the rest of the semester. And then once we clarify that, I think our next conversation will be how we then accept it. But for BMCC specifically, our transfer requirement is a 2.0. And we have a second chance program for students who want admission that fall under a 2.0. So again, our transfer and admissions policies are really lax because we are the open access institution. So that's why we're not yet jumping onto speed with that, because it doesn't necessarily impact our oncoming class as of right now.
This is Tammy. There have been conversations at the University of Florida. This is being led by our Associate Provost for Undergraduate Affairs. And as you might imagine, when you're in a shared governance model, the faculty from various areas can have widely differing opinions on whether it's appropriate to adjust admission, especially to those selected programs. My thought, what I'm hearing, I just listen in on those conversations. What I'm hearing is those selected programs like nursing and the other medical professions will most likely not look as fondly on grades of pass-fail, but those conversations are still being had, and so we don't have a specific policy as of yet, especially in the transfer world, because we understand in our native world, and even in with our native students, those selected programs are actually advising students not to take the pass-fail option in those classes. So it's all over the map with respect to which programs feel comfortable with having the pass-fail option in as a transfer grade.
Thank you, Tammy. I'm going to agree with the assertion there that it's all over the map, because that's what we're hearing from folks. And we will be gathering the data on that either in this next week's survey. We're rolling that out either for admissions or the following week on transfer evaluation practices. So a lot of the questions that are actually being asked in the Q&A have already been built into the survey, and those that have not, I'm taking some notes. But we have 5 folks that have given a thumbs up to a particular question here. Have any of you discussed what to do if a board cancels secondary examinations for students, GCE, A-levels, or the postponement will be after the start of fall enrollment and potentially India board examinations for standard 12? Has anyone discussed contingency plans for those students that may have already have admissions but will not have an equivalent graduation diploma? Kristen, Seth, or Tammy?
This is Seth. This is not something that the University of Baltimore typically sees in our students, so it's not something that we have had a conversation about yet. Okay. Well, it sounds like we don't yet have any input on that area, so we can put that question aside and try to get to it. We will get to these later in responses as we address more on guidance.
Wendy?
And, yes.
Can I just would like to say one thing regards to that.
Absolutely.
That we will have another webinar next week with testing services, and Cambridge is one of the testing services that will be online for that conversation. And so I know that that topic will come up. And so I don't think we have a solid answer just yet, because I'm not sure we know what all of these testing services are doing to ensure that their students get the appropriate completion documents. So more to come on that. We are working on that, but we don't have a solid answer just yet.
Thank you, Melanie. Some general questions about if your institution doesn't accept electronic transcripts, what are considered acceptable alternatives to paper transcripts? Any ideas, any suggestions?
This is Tammy. I would say at this point, if the student has some kind of access to grade records. So as I said earlier, we do self-reported not only at the freshman level, but we also do self-reported at the transfer and grad level. And so I think if there's some way that you can stand up a self-reported system, and with all the caveats that say, you know, if that we will verify this, and if we find it to be an error, then we will rescind admission. We've had self-reported for I would say about 5 years now, and over that 5 years, maybe a dozen students that we've actually rescinded admission for. So I don't know if that's a possibility for institutions to try to stand up, either working with your local IT folks or an outside vendor, standing up a self-reported academic record. That can really help you, not just during this time, but in a long term in peak times of processing.
This is Seth. One of the things that I've heard talked about is that if you can receive a PDF or an encrypted email or document from a verified email address at that sending institution, whether that be a high school principal or the registrar at a community college or another four-year institution or whatever, if you can set up a relationship where you know that you are receiving a verified document from a verified email, it might not be official, that you would count that as something official because you know that it came directly from the source without any opportunity for changes or tinkering.
Thank you. Again, trying to wrangle these questions here. Another series of questions about sort of orientation and registration. So for institutions, and we will ask these in the survey as well, but for institutions that do summer orientation and registration at the same time, and those have typically been in person. I heard Seth say some things were online at his institution. But for those who are going for from typically in-person orientation and summer registration, how are you addressing providing orientation and registration for the incoming students? So the technology and the methodology that you're undertaking.
This is Tammy. So we orient about 6,500 freshmen every, well, I guess it's probably more than that if we can include our PACE students. So we probably orient over 7,000 students summer. And so this is something that we have transitioned to a 3-part orientation. So there is a Canvas shell that students will go in and complete activities. They will watch videos, let's say from financial aid or from the bursar's office. They will complete certain activities in the Canvas shell. There will be some kind of community building activities that will be done with our previous staff members who will have students online, synchronous through Zoom. So they'll be doing a lot of that community building, letting them get a feel for what it means to be a Gator. And then we will have smaller breakout sessions with preview advisors that will work directly with those students on the registration piece and get those students registered for classes. Some of those the students will be registering themselves for, others they will be registered more centrally, but we have that 3-part model for our orientation this fall, and then plan to do more of an extended and enhanced convocation in the fall to help with the community building piece.
Thank you, Tammy. Kristen or Seth?
Yeah, I'll comment. So at BMCC, our practice is a little different, where we focus more on registration and then the orientation. And as part of our strategic plan, we are trying to flip that mindset where orientation is the day in which registration takes place, not you register for classes and then we have you do an orientation. So that being said, we want our students to try to register for classes as soon as possible. So once a student is ready to go, we pass that file on to our academic advising team. And they had already offered e-advising, but now they've expanded it to every single student. And they advise students, as long as the student is emailing them from their preferred email address from our student information system, they consider that official. And they'll do Skype, we use Microsoft Teams, we use Zoom, or email to advise a student. We also use Schedule Builder. And so we have tutorials on all of our websites to walk through a student how to register themselves remotely. Normally in person, we offer a lab for students. So when they meet with an advisor, they can move over and meet with someone in our lab services team to be advised. But that lab services team is doing that virtually as well. If a student emails us, we're connecting them virtually and giving them a tutorial on how to register for classes. But again, we're trying to get online through Blackboard available for all of our students to keep them connected and engaged. So we're really just trying to encourage the students to get registered right now. But we tend to find that for our institution, for our students, the biggest challenge is not having internet at home. And so we're trying to actually get our students up to speed with having a computer and an internet first, and then offering the services second.
Thank you, Kristen. Okay, we have a question here and that's been thumbed up a few times. I'm trying to get the gist of it. Is concern about faculty sending grade information via students as a one part, and then addressing sending forms back and forth between faculty and the student, perhaps for permission about grades being for this semester. Does anyone want to talk about how they're addressing that, or how that information might be impacting admission to selective majors on campus? Well, it sounds like that one may have stumped our panelists for a little bit. It's probably one of the things we haven't given much thought to. So we'll try to address that in some of our other guidance and other questions. Let's see, I'm going through these. Some questions about when the next transfer, when the form will be on transfer. I'm gonna let Melanie address that in here a little bit about the coffee breaks moving forward. Let's see, I think that we have addressed most of the questions that I can see and work through here to one degree or another, and want to recap that all of the questions will be looked at and all the answers will be aggregated and used to help ACRO shape our guidance out that we have out to you, and also to shape our practice surveys that we hope you help you find useful to make your own decisions on campus and actively support your efforts in all this transition time that you have. So Melanie, would like to hand that back over to you so you can address the upcoming coffee breaks and how those might roll out and the other resources we have. Thank you.
Absolutely, thanks so much. A couple of things that I want to just reiterate is that there are a number of resources available from a variety of our colleague institutions, from the testing organizations, that are all available on the acro.org/COVID-19. That is our collected resources page, and we are attempting to link to those primary sources so that when a testing organization has an update, that you'll be able to link directly from there to that update, as opposed to trying to rewrite everything on those pages. And so you can use that page as a landing page for collecting some of that information. A couple of other things I want to note is that while there are a lot of challenges that we can issue guidance on in a more sort of general philosophical approach, there are some institutions that find themselves in particularly tricky situations. And so that is something that we are working to support you with for ACRO. And so to build our, excuse me, I'm sorry. There we go. So for those of you who do need more specific and tailored guidance, ACRO Consulting has retooled and marshaled their expertise to offer heavily discounted express consulting sessions priced at only $9.95 to support your unique challenges with some very seasoned expertise and actionable recommendations. Contact consulting at acro.org for more information. Mike, next slide. I want to talk with you about the upcoming coffee breaks. So we are moving as quickly as we can based on feedback that we're getting from the current coffee breaks and also from the guidance requested on our COVID-19 page. And so I'd like to announce that we will have an ongoing series on Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern, and also possibly some other days and times as needed. So next week, we'll hear practical updates from the major testing services. We have IELTS, ETS, College Board, ACT, Cambridge, Pearson, IB, and possibly others. Registration is available online at acro.org/COVID guidance. That's the central location where you can find all the coffee breaks. We are also currently working on coffee breaks that will address issues like commencement planning and also issues around professional schools. We have been in close conversation with the American Association of Medical Colleges, with LSAC and others in order to share their resources as well. They look to some of ACRO's guidance to advise some of their members, and everyone is working to craft specific guidance to lead you all through this and to help our students as quickly as possible. So with that, I think that we are at the end of our time. I thank you very much for your time this afternoon, and please send us a note on that If you have other guidance questions that you'd like us to address on the COVID-19 page, and we look forward to hearing from you again next week. Thanks again.